And now, speaking of a big response, let's pop over to Oklahoma for a second, because I want to show you a weather map. I want to show you a weather map from Oklahoma from the first Saturday morning in September. This is September 2016, and this is a loop of the weather radar map that day. And we're going to run it on this little loop here so you can see what's weird about it. You see that blue-green, like, burst? This is not something you typically see on weather radar, right? It's like a bloom or like a burst or a flash bulb going off. What that is not clouds. It's not a storm. It's not a tornado or something. What that is, that big burst of blue and green on the weather map, that's birds. That's all the birds in Oklahoma taking off and flying away all at once. That happened at 6:47 a.m. on the morning of Saturday, September 3rd. All the birds in the state flew away to the point where it was captured on weather radar. The birds took off, apparently because they knew something was coming. Because 15 minutes after they did that, 15 minutes after 6:47 at 7:02 a.m., something did happen. 7:02 a.m., Saturday morning, September 3rd, there was an earthquake in Oklahoma, and the birds knew it was coming. Isn't that weird? It was a really big earthquake, though. It was the biggest earthquake to ever hit Oklahoma. In fact, it was the biggest earthquake to hit the continental United States in the last 2 years.
Nearly a full minute of shaking in Oklahoma, a state now rivaling California as earthquake country.
It was the biggest one I've ever felt.
Today, a 5.6 quake in the small town of Pawnee.
I gotta have you inspect the damage.
Emergency crews dousing fires, while other areas saw 100-year-old stone facades come crashing down. And in grocery stores, aisle after aisle in shambles.
Right away, you could tell this was something different.
The quake fanning out across the country, felt in Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, Arkansas, Texas, and as far as Illinois and Colorado. But more alarming than the shaking, an upward trend documented by the U.S. Geological Survey showing a spike in Oklahoma earthquakes, a region with heavy oil and natural gas production. This year, for the first time, geologists putting out a map highlighting areas prone to human-caused earthquakes. They're linked to the practice of fracking and injecting wastewater at high pressure deep into the earth.
That earthquake that hit Oklahoma in September, the one that made all the birds in the state fly away 15 minutes before it arrived, the U.S. Geological Survey now says that was a 5.8 magnitude quake, which is big. Oklahoma not only makes its own earthquakes now, it makes its own big earthquakes. That one, again, was the biggest quake to hit the continental United States in years. The Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma is a man named Scott Pruitt. He took office, he was sworn in 2011. That year, the year he took office, 2011, the number of earthquakes in Oklahoma that were a magnitude 3.0 or above was 63. Last year, Oklahoma had more than 600 earthquakes of that size. The U.S. Geological Survey did do a study of man-made earthquakes in the United States, induced earthquakes, and they make it very clear this is not like a big national problem in the United States. This is not everywhere. The U.S. Geological Survey did a study of man-made earthquakes, induced earthquakes a couple of years ago, and these are the maps from that study. Here's one of them. I think we've got a couple of these other maps. Yeah, that's the one that you saw in that NBC Nightly News piece, and I think we've got one more. Yeah, okay, so these are the maps from that study. You notice anything they all have in common? All of them are very, very focused on one area of the country, right? It's like flashing red lights, danger Will Robinson, danger Will Robinson. It's all right there on Oklahoma. This is an Oklahoma problem. Oklahoma has a very particular, specific problem with this unique, very modern environmental disaster. Oil and gas companies inject polluted wastewater from the fracking process deep into the ground in Oklahoma, and Oklahoma can't take it. The ground in Oklahoma can't take it. And now Oklahoma has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of earthquakes every year, multiple earthquakes per day, every day of the year in Oklahoma, including the biggest earthquakes in the continental United States. And it's not random. It's not like God is mad at Oklahoma and he keeps picking it up and rattling it like a snow globe. Now, this is happening specifically in that state as basically an environmental crime, right? It's happening in that state because of what oil and gas companies are doing to the environment there, what they are doing to the earth in that state. And we have seen it bloom over the past 5 years in Oklahoma. And for the last 5 years, the Attorney General of that state chose to do absolutely nothing about that problem. Actually, let me revise that. He did do one thing about that problem. In 2014, as Attorney General, he wrote to the federal government, he wrote to the EPA to complain that they were being too intrusive in trying to do anything about this problem. They were being too intrusive in trying to regulate fracking and these wastewater injection sites in the state of Oklahoma. So that is the one thing he did. He did nothing about it himself. His only action was to try and stop anybody else from doing anything else about it either. This complaint to the EPA, stay out of our fracking industry. That was it. When Scott Pruitt became Attorney General in Oklahoma, there was an existing environmental protection unit in his office, in the Attorney General's office. It had about a $500,000 budget. It was budgeted in the state budget as environmental law. Scott Pruitt eliminated that office entirely when he became Attorney General. There actually still is an environmental law line item in the Oklahoma state budget, but it is now zero. And it has been for a few years because Scott Pruitt shut it down. And now Scott Pruitt is the nominee to be the head of the EPA, the head of the nation's Environmental Protection Agency. And today we learned a little more about how, if you like what he's done for Oklahoma, you're going to love what he's going to do for our country. On the same day that our new president signed those presidential memoranda resurrecting the Keystone and Dakota Access pipelines, on the same day, an anonymous EPA employee surreptitiously got word to the outside world that in preparation for Scott Pruitt's takeover at the EPA, that agency has basically been frozen in its tracks. It's been brought to a halt. Now, there has been no announcement about this from the White House. They did not put out a press release about it. The White House spokesman, Sean Spicer, got asked about it today at the White House press briefing. He appeared to have no idea what he was even being asked about. The only reason we know about this is that an EPA employee took it upon himself or herself to secretly tip somebody off inside a congressional office on Capitol Hill. And somebody in a congressional office on Capitol Hill then told reporters. And that's the only reason we know that all EPA grants and contracts have been suspended effective immediately. That's the bulk of how EPA does its work. EPA oversees over $6 billion in grants and contracts, everything from monitoring air quality to cleaning up polluted industrial sites. All of that, according to these documents smuggled out to Capitol Hill today, all of that, all grants and contracts are suspended, quote, effective immediately. The agency has been effectively stopped. And again, there's been no official announcement about this. We only know it because an employee has blown the whistle. The only reason the employee had to blow the whistle in this way is because EPA employees have also been ordered to stop talking, to make no public pronouncements on anything. In addition to this information about the contracts and grants being halted, this document was smuggled out to a staffer on the Hill. It details, quote, restrictions that are effective immediately and will remain in place until further direction is received. This is what EPA employees have been told, and they've been told not to talk about it. Quote, no press releases will be going out to external audiences. Quote, no social media will be going out. No blog messages. The Beach team, meaning the incoming Trump administration, they will, quote, review the list of upcoming webinars to decide which ones will go forward. Quote, please send me a list of any external speaking engagements that are scheduled for any of your staff from today through February. Quote, incoming media requests will be carefully screened. Quote, no new content can be placed on any website. Even email lists are now under a gag order at the EPA. Quote, listservs will be reviewed. Only send out critical messages, as messages can be shared broadly and end up in the press. So the work of the agency is frozen. All existing contracts and grants are suspended immediately, and no EPA employees are allowed to make any public statements, including any online postings, social media, anything. They can't even make public appearances that were previously scheduled. Even their webinars are now getting... People have been worried that the Trump administration was going to try to abolish the EPA. It does not seem like they have figured out how to formally do that yet, but they've put it on ice. They have bound and gagged the EPA and put a hood on it, even before the new head of the agency is confirmed, and they tried to do it without anybody knowing. This gag order for people who work at the EPA is also not a solitary case. This appears to be part of a broader gag order initiative that the new administration is pursuing with multiple federal agencies, employees and agencies from the Department of Transportation to the Department of the Interior to the National Institutes of Health, the Health and Human Services, even the USDA. Employees at all of these agencies have now, to a certain degree, been told that they are no longer allowed to make public pronouncements. In some cases, they've been told explicitly they are no longer allowed to even provide information to congressional offices. The 2,000 scientists at the Agricultural Research Service, which is part of the USDA, they've been ordered to suspend immediately the distribution of any, quote, public-facing documents. Gag order. You are not allowed to talk, not in a way that the public can see. That apparently includes even letting people know about any scientific findings for publicly supported research that these scientists are involved in. Gag order. Today there was a little flurry of defiance from the Twitter account from one of the national parks, the Badlands in South Dakota. Their National Park Service Twitter account today started posting random but real facts about climate change, apparently in defiance of the new gag orders that the Trump administration is instituting across the government. For a brief moment today, for example, this was one of their climate change tweets that was visible online. Today, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is higher than at any time in the last 650,000 years. That is true, but that is now gone. It's interesting, about 4:30 this afternoon, the Democratic Party put out a press release rounding up all this reporting today on all these gag orders applying to all these different federal agencies, public employees being told that they're not allowed to speak. The DNC asked, again, this was at about 4:30 this afternoon, they put this in writing, quote, how long will it take for the Twitter account of Badlands National Park Service to be suspended for its defiance? They put that out at 4:30. The answer was less than an hour. By 5:30, all those tweets about climate change from Badlands National Park, all of them were disappeared. All of them were deleted. And then after that, the DNC put out a statement this evening that read, very bluntly, quote, Vladimir Putin would be proud. Again, as I mentioned at the top of this hour, one of the leading candidates to be the new head of the Democratic Party is going to be here tonight for the interview. We will hear what he has to say about this. But, you know, all that scurrying and worrying you heard after the election from scientists and researchers and data geeks who are freaking out about government data sets being disappeared by the new administration, you know, people scrambling to archive all the public-facing data about climate and the environment and all those other issues. You heard a lot about that right after the election, people scrambling to try to download and save that data so it wouldn't be disappeared. Seemed a little paranoid, but interesting. Now we know, not paranoid. Now we know, day 4 of the new administration, those people were not wrong to be freaked out, and they probably, in the interest of science, were not wrong to be downloading and trying to save data privately, because the data is disappearing. The scientists are being told they are not allowed to speak or publish. It is already happening. It's day 4, it is already happening. Focus, everybody. Focus. We'll be right back.